Hi. Um, I wanted to share today with on a topic that I shared about on more than one occasion about carbohydrates. Um, and the other day I made a statement. I said, "Don't get angry at your carbohydrates. Change them." And I want to show you what I mean. So I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to show you exactly what I meant when I said that. Now, these are all foods that help to reduce inflammation in the body. Now, what is inflammation? Inflammation, when I speak and you hear other health coaches talk about inflammation, it's very similar to setting the body on fire. And how do we set our bodies on fire? Usually, it's done through food. So poor food choices. It goes a lot deeper than that. But for all intents and purposes today, I'm just going to talk about, I'm just going to skim the surface on that, and I'll go deeper into that at another time. So an anti-inflammatory diet actually helps to counteract that inflammation um, that often arises in the body from some of the foods that we eat, namely highly processed foods, sugars, and seed oils. They are all inflammatory. So highly processed foods like burgers, fries, um, um, cookies, um, all these high sugar chocolates, sweets, candy, cereals that are loaded with sugars, because all of these things are very processed. And even though it may have a healthy label on the outside of the packaging, does not mean that anything health related went into it. It may have one ingredient or two that under normal conditions would be considered healthy, but they aren't exactly healthy. So highly inflammatory foods, they actually contribute to diseases in the body. That inflammation can drive atherosclerosis, leading to buildup in the arteries that causes scarring, and that eventually can lead to cardiac conditions, high blood pressure, stuff like that. Highly inflammatory foods can also lead to metabolic disorders, disruptions with the way the body is able to deal with insulin, and this can lead to obesity, diabetes, causing a malfunction or dysfunction of the pancreas. It can also impact your kidneys, your liver, all of it can result in fatty liver disease, which can lead to other complications as well. How the body eliminates waste, how the body utilizes the nutrition that we eat on a daily basis. So today I just want to talk about swapping out, um, changing your carbohydrates. So some of our favorite carbohydrates are things like bread, as I mentioned, processed cereals. These are packaged cereals, sugary foods. These are the type of carbohydrates, cakes, donuts, waffles are another thing as well. Pancakes, all of these are considered inflammatory foods. They can lead to inflammation. So if we look at carbohydrates, Now, instead of choosing carbohydrates by way of just simple carbs, as I mentioned before, bread and so forth, or even potatoes, we can look at the type of carbohydrates that we're choosing. One thing that we need to understand, all, if not most of the vegetables that we eat, you can find carbs in them. So you're not cutting carbs out of your diet. You're just changing the quality of the carbohydrates that you do eat. So for instance, you have ground provisions, sweet potato, um, it's slightly higher in fiber than regular white potatoes, and it contains more minerals. So more nutrients are found in sweet potatoes than white potatoes. So have the sweet potato because the fiber construct is very different to white potatoes. Carrots, cauliflower, broccoli, um, aubergine, or depending on where you live, eggplant, they too have carbohydrates in them. So look for those types of foods to put on your plate if you are changing or want to change the type of carbs that you should be eating. Eat more fruit, and fruit in its whole form. Why? Again, because of the fiber that you would find in these fruits. Choose the fruits. Do not juice them. Don't buy juices, which often is made from concentrate and they have more sugars added to them. A whole fruit or a whole piece of fruit, you get the fiber, which helps to slow the naturally occurring sugars. When we eat them, the fiber helps to slow how quickly the sugar gets dispersed into our bloodstreams. Plus, you're looking at vitamins and minerals that are present in the fruit and veg. Beans and legumes. Now, I know for some people, some people struggle to digest beans, peas and beans. So look for those types of beans or legumes that are easier for you to digest. An easy one is lentils. Lentils tend to be very easy to digest. So have a look at the peas and beans that you eat. You do have carbs in there, but again, the fiber. It is better to purchase dried beans and cook them yourself rather than take them out of a tin. They often have way too much salt in the tin. And also the tins tend to have BPA, they're BPA lined. And BPA, it's one of those ingredients or one of those chemicals that actually affect how our hormones work, especially for us as women. And I'm going to be talking about that another day. So stick a pin in that. I think it's called biphenyl. Oh, can't remember the chemical name right now, but I will be talking about that, BPA. Then you have whole grains. Now, whole grains are usually grains that have not been denatured by processing and packaging. So whole grain rice, that's a better alternative than buying white rice because it would keep more of the fiber intact. Corn is also another carbohydrate, but I need you to be careful with corn because corn, a lot of the corn, at least 95 to 98% of the corn that we have available, and that percentage could be disputed, it may be even higher. That corn is genetically modified corn, and it's not good for our digestive systems or for our gut health. So be very careful with corn. The same thing with wheat. A lot of the strains that are available now are or have been genetically modified. So again, you have more people these days that are experiencing allergies to gluten. And it isn't so much the gluten that's in the wheat, but it is how it was grown and the fertilizers and so forth that they spray them with that our bodies are reacting to. So if you are one of those who you've had to move away from flour or products with gluten, some oats do carry gluten as well. Some oats also, they have been genetically modified unless it is stated that it is organic oats or organic flour. So there are brands on the market that you can look for in your area and have a look at organic foods and see what type of reaction that you get from them. I'm not here to advertise anybody's products, but have a look in your area and see what's available on your shelf. Read the packaging always. Then we're looking at healthy fats and oils. Now, how is this different? How is this different to other food pyramids or healthy food plates? This is different because the base of this pyramid starts off with fruit and veg. For many years, the food pyramid started with whole grains. Whole grains, that's what it started with, and some beans and legumes. So this was the base, the whole grains, that was the base of the pyramid, which meant you had populations, especially in the Western countries like the United States and the United Kingdom and parts of Europe, that consumed way too many whole grains or too much whole grains in their diet, even though their lifestyle, there was no need for it because the lifestyle that started to progress into the 80s and the 90s meant that we had a more sedentary population. So we needed carbohydrates. Carbohydrates is a quick energy source for the body. You have simple carbohydrates, as in the bread, and then you have complex carbohydrates, as in legumes and things like sweet potatoes and so forth. They are considered complex. Complex carbohydrates, as I said earlier on, has more fiber in there, so it allows you to digest at a slower rate. So the body is using it as needed, whereas simple carbohydrates digest very quickly, and the sugars that are released from these carbohydrates get sent into the bloodstream and causes spikes in your blood sugar levels. Too many of those spikes makes it difficult for the body to manage, and then you start storing that fat around the liver because the body can't get rid of it. So anything that the body cannot use at that time, it will store. Hence the reason why some people, in fact, a lot of the population, have fatty liver disease. Now let's talk about oils. What are healthy fats? Healthy fats are those that have not been denatured. And when I say denatured, highly processed oils. Soybean, canola oil, rapeseed, sunflower oil, vegetable oils, corn oils are considered all highly processed, and they are not healthy for the human body. And they should be avoided really at all costs. There was a big contention a couple of years ago about coconut oil and whether it was healthy or not. But all oils that have been cold pressed or extra virgin oil, cold pressed meaning that there was no heat in the extraction, of the oils, which makes it much easier and much easier for the body to digest and utilize. So coconut oil works very well. It is very stable at high heat. Olive oil is not. So if you are frying foods, and the suggestion is that you do not fry foods, you can use coconut oil to fry those foods. Olive oil is used as a dressing. It is not, you should never take olive oil to the smoking point, because the oil becomes denatured and it can become a carcinogen. Avocado oil is another one that is cold pressed. The oil is not extracted from the seed, so therefore it is not a seeded oil. It comes from the pulp of the fruit of the avocado. Then you have your healthy nuts, such as almonds, walnuts, pecans, Brazil nuts. These are all hazelnuts. These are all considered healthy nuts. However, the peanut is not considered a nut, even though it's called a ground nut. It is really in the bean and legume family. So peanuts and cashews, you have to be careful with cashews as well, because sometimes they can cause bacterial or microbacterial overgrowth in the gut. So sometimes they're not. You need to be careful with peanuts especially, and look out for cashews. Then seafood. And I want to let you know, let's talk about the servings, because we'll talk about the servings. Let me go through the pyramid and then we'll talk about the servings. So fish and seafood, 2 to 6 servings per week. We could learn a lot from places in Italy and also Japan. The Japanese people eat, they have a predominant diet of fish. They have the lowest incidences of heart disease and cancer, and also obesity. And they have some of the longest living people on the planet. So fish and seafood, they have been classified as brain food and also heart healthy. So we should be having 2 to 6 servings of fish per week. Then we have butter, eggs, dairy, and lean meats. Now let's talk about butter. Butter has been another controversial food. At one point in time, a few years ago, it was said that butter was no good for you, and butter led to heart attacks and high cholesterol. Same as eggs. So, as an alternative to butter, the miracle margarine appeared on the scene. However, margarine is not real food. Margarine is really a byproduct of plastic. So when you eat margarine, you're not doing yourself any favors. And it is really amazing that margarine is still being projected as a health food by the heart associations and also cancer associations. So I would suggest that you take butter, or at least take margarine out of your diet and eat butter. But then you can say to me, Marcia, butter is too expensive. Butter is expensive. These days, butter is expensive, and depending on where you live, it can be very expensive. So my advice to you is make your own. Make my own butter, you say, Marcia? Yes, make your own butter. And I'm going to post a video as well, and I'll show you that you can make your own butter. Then eggs. The same thing was said of eggs, that we need to get rid of the yolk and only eat the whites. but we need to eat the whole egg for its nutritional value. Cholesterol is not a bad thing, and even though there isn't quite a lot of correlating evidence, meaning supporting evidence, but for years, you've had people on statin drugs to control cholesterol in the blood. And now we have a very high incidence of dementia. You have more people who are being diagnosed with dementia than ever before. And it is set to get worse into the millions. And eggs are one food, it's another food that's really good for the brain. The yolk, the cholesterol in the yolk actually helps to feed the brain because the brain is a large percentage of fat. All right, so the brain needs fat. So things like healthy oils, you need to have healthy oils in your diet. And we're looking at about 5 to 7 servings per day. My God, Marcia, that seems like a heaping amount of fat. But if you are trying to lose weight and you're cutting fats, cut the bad fats and put the good fats back into your diet. The fish that we have here, they're all considered fatty fish. Those are the healthiest varieties of fish that we should be eating. Things like salmon, sardines, tuna, mackerel. You have some shellfish as well because they are very high in zinc. And if you're a woman with hormonal issues, then shellfish is something you would want to keep on your radar because of the zinc. Eating shellfish is actually good for your hormonal health. So we spoke about the butter, lean meats. So you have like turkey. Turkey, there's an amino acid in turkey called tryptophan. It works very well for enhancing your mood and also putting depression at bay. So if you tend to suffer low moods, then it is best to add some turkey into your diet. Maybe it says here 1 or 2 times a week, get some turkey on your plate and start getting some turkey in your diet. Then milk. I remember growing up, the neighborhood milkman would bring a milk, and it was raw milk. And we had very few incidences of obesity, very few incidences of allergies. Now, I did not like milk at all. I hated the taste of it. But you can have things like yogurt. I eat yogurt. And I like to eat plain yogurt because often some of these yogurts that are put forward as being healthy, and it's good for gut health. When you look at the amount of sugar, which is gut destroying, by the way, that sugar in the yogurt makes it unhealthy. So watch out for yogurt. If you're having plain yogurt, my advice to you is add your own fruit to it and use the fruit sugars as a sweetener in your plain yogurt. That is much better for your gut health, and make sure the yogurt has live cultures in it. So things like kefir, as I said, Greek yogurt is another one that's high in protein, but make sure all of them are plain. Add your own fruit. And then healthy treats. Now you see chocolate here. This chocolate is not the ordinary milk chocolate. It's 75 to 80% dark chocolate, which is loaded with antioxidants. And antioxidants are cellular protective, and they do help against tissue and cellular damage. Then you have dried fruit. Be careful with dry fruit. These things are to be eaten in small amounts because once you dry the fruit, those very same sugars caramelize within the fruit and they can spike your blood sugar. So you want to eat small amounts of dried fruit and small amounts of your dark chocolate. So these are options for anti-inflammatory, the anti-inflammatory food pyramid. I know that foods are becoming more and more expensive. So therefore, we are going to have to do this in a smart way. In a smart way. Look for what's on sale in your area. Buy fruit and veg that are in season. That's one way of making sure they're plentiful and also they come cheap. Don't be afraid of frozen veg. They're often cheaper than fresh. Fresh is best, but the next best alternative is frozen veg. Wastage is low because we all know that sometimes when we don't use our vegetables fast enough in the refrigerator, then we end up with spoilage. But when you see your fruits starting to, or your veg starting to go off, start using them, put them in with other things that you're preparing. For instance, you can put them in with your peas and beans when you're cooking them. Cook them with your meats, your fish, your meats, and use it in that way. The reason why I wanted to do this, I remember I think it was sometime last week, I had gone into the refrigerator and I remember I had 2 sweet peppers in there that I had bought the week before and I hadn't used them in my food preparations. And when I pulled it out, I noticed on the outside of one, there was an area that was going soft. But when I cut it open to cut away that portion, because at least 90% of it was still intact, as I cut it open, I saw small areas where I had mold growing in it. And it made me think of the human body, that oftentimes by the time we see disease manifesting itself on the outside, it means that changes had been taking place on the inside, unbeknownst to us. So when we start to feel or see the effects of disease on the outside, bet your bottom dollar that there were changes, cellular changes, functions started changing on the internal that were missed, and we can't do anything about it until we actually see it. And this has been my experience, especially with live blood analysis. Live blood analysis, I've been doing it now for about 15 years, and it is a very revelatory tool in determining what it's a good forecasting tool. Let me put it that way. It allows me to see what's going on in the other person's body by way of the blood. We know the Bible tells us that all life is in the blood. Everything, that is where life is. You cannot live without your blood. If you are injured and your wound causes blood loss, you will die. But if we are able to look at the blood and we're able to see the changes that are taking place in the cells, then we are able to take preemptive action to change a lot of what's going on in the body before it magnifies itself and turns into disease. So there, for instance, there's certain patternings that we see with red blood cells that when you begin to investigate, you realize that the person is pre-diabetic. Once they get the blood test done and they start making the checks. I have caught cancer, the early stages of cancer, that we were able to get a turnaround on it by changing diet and lifestyle. So these things, everything that I'm talking to you here about today, is a reflection of what's going on in the body. So eat fresh fruits and eat as much of it as you can. Get peas and beans into your diet, 1 to 2 servings a day. So you can have it for breakfast, you can have it for dinner. Look at the times of the day that you tolerate it best, and you can have meat-free days. I'm not an advocate for veganism, but I am an advocate for meat-free days. Our bodies were built for lack and feast. So you have famine and you have feast. That's our bodies are built for that. We weren't built for rich foods all the time. So I just want to leave this with you. Have a look at the servings, vegetables, 4 to 5 servings minimum a day. The more veg you eat, the better for you. So try to put vegetables at every meal. 2 to 4 servings a day. What time of day is the best day to eat fruits? It's better to have it in the morning. When you have it in the evening or too close to bed, you run the risk of it causing fermentation in your stomach and causing digestive issues and bothering you as you sleep. Whole grains, 3 to 5 servings a day. If you have strenuous activities, you may want to add a little extra, but just remember, strenuous activities means that if you are a laborer, carbohydrates, that's your friend, because of course you're burning energy every single day. Peas and beans, 1 to 2 servings a day. Healthy fats, 5 to 7 servings a day. So in the afternoon, instead of reaching for that donut, the extra cup of coffee or sweets or so, after you've had the crash after your meal, especially if you had a meal with lots of carbohydrates, it has happened to me. A carb-filled meal, you tend to crash 3-4 hours later. Why? Because of the whole fermentation process with the carbohydrates and the sugars. There is a way to overcome that, and I'll talk about that another day. It's called food priming, and we'll talk about that. Fish, don't forget what I said about fish, 2 to 6 servings. Lean meat, eggs, and dairy, they say here 1 to 2 servings per week. You have other people who say that we can eat eggs every single day. But really, variety is the spice of life, and it's good to get variety into your diet as much as possible, because then it allows you to cover as many nutrients as possible, that you get the nutrients from your foods. And then your healthy treats. Dark chocolate, you can do some dehydrated fruit, but again, be careful with dried fruit because it can cause issues with your blood sugar levels. It can cause your blood sugar levels to spike. So small amounts, small amounts, small amounts. All right, guys, I'm off. I will be back later in the week if time permits. And I certainly will share more of what I have to say. All right. Thank you very much. Bye.